Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health Radio and TV. I'm your host, Sarah Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of 3 teenagers. Today, my guest will be talking about intermittent fasting and its benefits for the body, mind, and spirit. And I know that you really need that strong physical foundation to work on your mental and spiritual growth, whether it's overcoming anxiety and depression, losing weight, or detoxing your body in the proper way, and even increasing your level of frequency in life. You need that strong physical foundation of health in order to gain the willpower to make the bigger changes in life. If you're new to following me, I specialize in helping you get there. You can find my health articles, my cutting edge natural supplements, devices, and protocols at acceleratedhealthproducts.com. I dive into an array of health conditions, their causes and symptoms, and how to address them naturally. And I have spent thousands of dollars and hours of my time biohacking different supplements, technologies, and diets that don't work, so you don't have to. If you have any health issues you need help with, you can email me directly through the website. I personally read everyone. Accelerated Health Products is the sponsor of this show. So as you support my website, I'm able to bring you more cutting edge content and guests to the show. Today, we are going to be diving in on how to optimize your health through intermittent fasting and how it slows down the aging process and helps reverse chronic disease. But first, I want to talk about some tools you can use to enhance the results you achieve, make it easier to fast without that hangry feeling, that detox flu symptoms that you might have previously experienced. And you can actually not just anti-age, but reverse aging. And the first one is the accelerated keto. This is not just any keto supplement. This flips you into the fat burning mode within 30 minutes, and your body taps into its own fat stores for energy right away. You feel great physically and mentally. And the thing is, you think, I can do this now. When the body's running on the ketones produced by the accelerated keto combined with intermittent fasting and a low carb diet, instead of utilizing glucose for energy, ATP production increases significantly in mitochondria, and mitochondria biogenesis is optimized. This is the key to reverse age. Furthermore, the additional ingredients in the accelerated keto breaks down saturated fats into unsaturated. Easier it is for the liver to function in all areas, including breaking down those fat molecules into usable energy and increased mitochondrial biogenesis. The liver is also where the thyroid hormones convert from T4 to T3, and as the liver functions better, the thyroid works better, increases metabolism, mitochondrial function, and energy further. One thing that the accelerated keto has that no other supplement has is HMB. Most protein supplements advertise that they have leucine in it. Well, what people don't know is that we really want to get to that HMB, and only 3% of leucine converts into HMB, and HMB is what prevents muscle wasting, which is so important if you're fasting and you're a woman, and we're going to be talking about that. So with more healthy muscle tissue, more mitochondria is increased and more ATP is sustained. Another ingredient in the accelerated keto is the organic mucil, and this is known to break down the fats further, provide that energy spark to burn those fats as it breaks down. It also supports your joint and muscle health. Next is the accelerating iodine, and sufficient iodine in all tissues and cells needs to produce that 36 ATP, where most cells are only producing 2 ATP per mitochondria. So you're getting 18 times the increase in ATP production with Accelerdyne. And Accelerdyne also helps improve the metabolism and physical energy. So when you're fasting, you're actually improving your physical energy to do more, which is only going to have a positive effect. As the thyroid is functioning optimally and the ATP is maximized, your fasting gains are going to increase. It is the only monoatomic iodine that feeds the cells directly with 100% bioavailability and is not toxic like most iodine supplements that only have 10 to 20% absorption. It also is further enhanced, just like a lot of the accelerated supplements, with scalar frequencies to detox the cells from heavy metals, graphene oxide, and radiation. It has been shown to help reverse the damage from mRNA. We are also going to be talking about the importance of electrolytes within fasting, and the accelerated ancient salt is not just any salt. It is charged with those scalar frequencies to further enhance the detoxification effects, but it also has over 62 minerals in it. Most salts are full of microplastics, and they also have stripped away all of the other minerals besides sodium. So it's super helpful during those intermittent fasting periods. Now to the good stuff. We are going to be talking to Cynthia Thurlow, who is a nurse practitioner, CEO, and founder of the Everyday Wellness Project, and international speaker with over 10 million views for her second TEDx talk. With over 20 years experience in health and wellness, Cynthia is a globally recognized expert in intermittent fasting and nutritional health. And she now works with thousands of women in her private practice to make her unique program of intermittent fasting work for them also. With meal plans and 50 recipes, along with advice for supercharging your fast, this plan will transform your life, slow down the aging process, and help you reclaim your health and well-being. And now she is the author of a fantastic book, Intermittent Fasting Transformation, which I'm loving. Welcome, Cynthia. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, Sarah.
Well, I know you've been very busy because this book is just flying off the shelves, I'm assuming. I can't put it down. And what I just love is not only do we have a lot of common friends in the industry, but more importantly, our philosophies align in every category, which is so exciting. So I'm super excited to have you on. And I really am telling all of my clients to get your book. It is, it's in layman's terms, super easy to read, but it dives into the nerdiness just enough so you get huge takeaways. And I want you to know, and we're going to get to it a little later, but you said something in one of your interviews that was another aha moment for me. And I made a big shift in the last week just because of you. So I will get into that in a little bit. But first, why don't we tell everybody what your story is, especially with your son and then with your own health crisis, because passion comes from our own lives. And that's what has brought me to where I am today. But people need to hear your story.
Yeah, well, thank you for that warm welcome. I think it all starts with my oldest son, who's now 16, hard to believe. But when he was 4 months old, he developed horrific eczema. And I always like to remind people that as a nurse practitioner, I think I can handle just about anything. But the kind of standard methodology of addressing eczema is just to prescribe high potency topical corticosteroids, which of course will address the redness, the plaquing, and the itching that he was experiencing, but didn't address the root cause. And so every time I took him to the pediatrician for well visits, he was thriving, otherwise happy, thriving, sleeping well, just a beautiful little boy. I just kept saying, is it something I'm eating? Because at the time he was exclusively breastfed. And that was always kind of diminished. And over time, I kept saying, it has to be something I'm doing. It has to be something I have done to contribute to this. And so I actually pushed to get his allergies tested, although that was the last thing I wanted to do with a, then like 1-year-old child. And I was dismayed to learn that he had life-threatening food allergies to tree nuts, peanuts. And we know that based on research that only about 30% of children will outgrow their food allergies. So this really set me into a tailspin. I was very fearful, and this is not my personality. But I think because I had taken care of so many severe allergic reactions in the ER as an ER nurse in Baltimore, plenty of anaphylaxis, which is the technical terminology, that put a great deal of fear and concern in me. And I kept saying to my husband, I wasn't comfortable taking him to restaurants. I was a little, fearful about family members not really understanding this is a true allergy, not a sensitivity, but an allergy. And the allergist let me leave the office, and her resounding phrase to me or statement was, carry an EpiPen and pray. And that wasn't acceptable to me. And I spoke to more and more peers and friends and family members. It was like an epidemic of children having severe food allergies. It became a running joke if there was something in school or there was a play date or there was a birthday party that more often than not, half the kids had food allergies. And again, not sensitivities, but food allergies. And so over time, I really went down a rabbit hole. And there was a book I read by Robin O'Brien called The Unhealthy Truth. And it made me angry to recognize how big ag and the USDA and a lot of the policies that have gone on has contributed to the rise in food sensitivities, food allergies, the genetically engineered, I don't even want to touch on a specific subject, but suffice it to say, there were a lot of contributors to why we were seeing so many children developing food allergies. Yeah. And for me, it really started from there. That's when, even as a nurse practitioner in cardiology, I started looking differently at food, really looking at food as medicine. I made all of his food. We didn't really eat out at all. By then I had another child who didn't have food allergies, thankfully. But it really opened me up to the possibility that there was more to nutrition than what I had been taught in school. And so I would say the next few years, as I'm in the blur of having boys that are only 2 years apart, as I know you're probably familiar with as well, there were many years that were a blur. And then, I just got to a point where, we had moved into a new house. My kids were both in elementary school, and I had been doing what I thought everything right. I ate healthy, exercised, probably didn't sleep enough, didn't realize it. And no one had really prepared me for perimenopause, the 5 to 10 years preceding menopause. And when you don't sleep enough, you have a very stressful, very demanding job. My husband did a lot of international travel. I had 2 young kids, and I was probably doing really, really strenuous exercise that for a 20 or 30-year-old would have been fine, but not for me at that stage of life. And so I hit a wall. And, being 5'3", gaining 10 pounds was a lot. And, I kept saying, this can't be the end of the beginning of something very different. I wasn't sleeping well. I developed food sensitivities. And so down the rabbit hole I went with addressing perimenopause. And the one thing I want to make really clear to your listeners is that no one had prepared me for what perimenopause would be like. Not my GYN, not my mom, not my girlfriends. There is a degree of shame about aging, and women don't want to really talk about it. And I think that's why, in many ways, I feel like there needs to be a platform where women can come together and talk about the changes that are going on in reverse puberty. That's one way to think about it. Yeah. And so I found my way, because I'm tenacious, I found my way to intermittent fasting as maybe this will be something that will get my gut back online, that'll help me sleep, that will help me lose this fluff that I never wanted. And to make a really long story short, once I started utilizing intermittent fasting for myself, I felt so much better so quickly that it slowly, pardon the expression, bled into the work I was doing in clinic and the hospital, talking to patients. And then in my own kind of entrepreneurial space, I started talking more and more about sustainable, lifelong strategies, because I think in a lot of ways, when we look at the health and wellness industry, a lot of what we see as consumers is the latest, greatest. It's a potion, it's a pill, it's a powder, it's going to fix all our problems. And oh, by the way, you're going to be taking this for the rest of your life. And so it was really important to me to utilize strategies that women could. It's almost like you learn to fish. Learn how to fish, you can, feed yourself forever. Mm-hmm. And so, fasting to me was a strategy that I could utilize with my patients and clients and talk about it from a scientific perspective, as opposed to just saying, hey, this is the thing that's going to change your body composition and make you lose weight. I remind women that there's so much more to that. And so they come to intermittent fasting with a desire to lose weight, and they stay for all the other benefits.
Everything that you just said, it hits home with me, because I'm in perimenopause, and it I wasn't prepared for it. My mom never had this conversation with me, and I was doing great. I felt, I love working out. I love exercise. I'm a type A personality. I'm a go, go, go. We're also in this generation where we've got our parents getting older. Our kids are needing us in a different way. We're not changing diapers, but we sure need to be there mentally and emotionally for them. And then, of course, our husbands need us as well. So there's all of this pressure on us, and we're trying to take care of ourselves. But the stress hits you. Your adrenals are starting to take over with the hormonal production, which we've never experienced before. My girls are athletes, and they work out way harder than I could ever put my body through, but they can, because they still have functioning ovaries and we don't, where that's a new element to our balance of hormones. Most of us are also now insulin resistant because we've had a lifetime of eating wrong. And even us people who are eating healthy with low carb, we're eating a lot of fake sugars that could be tricking our insulin and our blood sugar. We could be eating these healthy carbs that have hidden sugars in them, and just maybe had a lifetime of eating the wrong things and now just approaching a healthier approach. So all of these things are kind of coming in on us in our 40s and 50s. So let's look at what is intermittent fasting doing for someone in perimenopause? And then I want to get into menopause, because there's this fine dance of your hormones and balancing them and making you feel good.
Well, and I think you bring up some really great points, that perimenopause is just the beginning of this second stage of our lives. And for many of us, especially if you're type A, you're very achievement oriented, our mindset and methodology is really focused on, I just have to work out harder. I just have to eat less, because that's what we've been conditioned to believe. And so what I find for many, many women is that they undereat protein, they overeat the wrong types of carbohydrates, and they eat the wrong types of fats. So when I'm starting like the very basics about intermittent fasting, and I usually use the term eating less often, because the word fasting in and of itself, I find, can be a little triggering for some people, is that by eating less frequently, we are going to have better balanced blood sugar. And we are going to learn strategies that are going to help with insulin sensitivity. So the first thing that really comes to that is, if you're snacking, you need to stop. No one should be snacking. Snacking in between meals is a sign that you didn't stack your macros together. Mm-hmm. Macros are talking about protein, fat, and carbohydrates. And I am very pro animal-based protein. I talk about how critically important it is for not only helping to maintain and build lean muscle mass. And you need to think about your muscle as not only an organ of longevity, but it is something that helps with insulin sensitivity. So around the age of 40, most women start losing muscle mass, and it's being replaced by adipose tissue. And fat tissue is not just fat. It is actually a very sophisticated inflammatory organ. And I remind women, when women say, oh, I'm not as hungry at 45 as I used to be at 35. And I explain that part of that is it's multiple things that have come together, but part of it is that you don't have as much lean calorie burning muscle as you had when you were younger. So first and foremost, remove the snacking, then kind of navigate into a protein centric diet. This does not mean carnivore. That isn't right for everyone. And I'm a firm believer that bioindividuality rules. So you're focused on protein, non-starchy vegetables, the right types of fats. If the fat isn't already incorporated, like as an example, if you're having salmon or ribeye, there are plenty of healthy fats already there, as opposed to if you have a piece of cod, or maybe you're having some chicken breast, something that doesn't intrinsically have a lot of fat in it. And then adding in carbohydrates, and I use the term if you have earned them. So depending on where you are in your menstrual cycle, depending on how physically active you've been that day, depending on how insulin sensitive you are. And you did bring up a great point. Most women, as they edge into perimenopause, become increasingly more insulin resistant, which means you need to eat less carbohydrates. And again, this is another thing that I talk to women about, that when I talk about carbs, non-starchy vegetables, citrus fruits, berries, The starchier things like root vegetables, sweet potatoes, squash are going to be superior to bread and pasta and rice and things like that. And again, it really goes back to bioindividuality. I find a lot of women, it's very nuanced. Having a glucometer, having a continuous glucose monitor can be very, very insightful about how your body reacts to certain types of carbohydrate loads and even certain types of carbohydrates. So when people want to fight me on the carbohydrate issue, I always say, grab a glucometer, monitor what your blood sugar, what your response is to a particular food, and that can help guide suggestions and recommendations. So when you're eating less frequently, you're better to stabilize your blood sugar, which is going to improve insulin sensitivity. We also think about the cues that you receive. So we have appetite and satiety cues. Some of those are met with hitting your protein macros, really pushing the protein at a meal so that you're not hungry. You are not hungry. You will step away from the table. But more often than not, when people are eating too frequently and eating the wrong types of food, especially a very carbohydrate heavy diet, they are going to lose the appetite and satiety cues. So their leptin and ghrelin don't work quite as well. But as we become more insulin sensitive with eating less frequently, we will get better regulation of leptin and ghrelin. I also like to talk about, cortisol. Cortisol is not a bad hormone. It gets a really bad rap. But for a lot of women, when they are on that rushing, there's a terminology called rushing woman syndrome. And it's a great book if you haven't read it. But I remind women that our bodies are much more exquisitely sensitive to stress. It is not to suggest that we are unable to manage stress in middle age, but we manage stress and mitigate it much easier in our 20s and 30s. And as we get closer to perimenopause, and as our ovaries are producing less and less progesterone, our adrenal glands step in to help support the progesterone needs of our bodies. And so I remind people that our adrenal glands are designed to be an emergency backup system. They are not designed to be 24/7. You've got your foot on the accelerator. But in our overharried, overstressed existence, and certainly the last 2 years have not done us any favors, It's important for women to understand that managing cortisol means managing stress. And when cortisol goes up, guess what happens? Your blood sugar goes up, your insulin's going to go up. I have a lot of women who don't understand that interrelationship of really managing and mitigating stress. So again, eating less frequently is going to put less stress on your adrenals. It's going to help better manage cortisol. Cortisol, as I stated before, is the emergency backup system in the body, not designed to be tapped into consistently and chronically. And then lastly, when you're not dealing with as much insulin resistance, you're going to get better hormonal balance with testosterone and estrogen. Predominant form of estrogen in our bodies prior to menopause is called estradiol. But if we are dealing with a lot of insulin resistance, we can aromatize, this really sexy word, aromatization of testosterone to estrogen, and we can get a worsening of the estrogen dominance that a lot of women experience. And when would you be estrogen dominant? What are the signs? And so very heavy periods, weight gain, breast tenderness, when we have low progesterone in relation to estrogen, which does, again, this is that part of that reverse puberty. When they're low in progesterone, will have trouble sleeping. They may have more anxiety or depression. This may lead them to being prescribed anti-anxiety medications, depression medications, when in essence, what they need is a little bit of progesterone to help them sleep, which will also help them better balance their estrogen. And the last thing I would say about fasting that can also be beneficial is that I find for a lot of women who are dealing with, and there are many women who think that constipation is normal. And I have to remind women it is not normal. It's a sign that your detoxification pathways, probably your gallbladder, probably your liver need a little bit of love, is that when you're eating less frequently, they're sometimes able to get a better grasp on having regular bowel movements, understanding what it feels like when they have that food bolus, and that will push food along in their gut, but also helps to regulate estrogen as well. If they're properly packaging up and getting rid of estrogen in those daily bowel movements, that can be very helpful. So I do find hormonally that fasting has a lot of benefits, but these in particular are the ones that I see in middle-aged women that are of greatest benefit. And it may not happen overnight. I always remind women that insulin resistance, leptin resistance does not happen overnight. I do not expect anyone to have all of their hormones, perfect in a couple weeks' time, but all of the little incremental changes do yield huge results.
Oh my gosh, where do I start? Because you just hit on so many things. And I promote wild animal protein, just like you. And I promote starting with your protein, breaking a fast with protein, because number one, when you break a fast with that protein, you get that bump in glucagon to insulin ratio, which gives you an extra bump of fat burning. So if people are on that plateau and can't get off of it, that's one little trick I do. But also, whoever binges on a prime rib steak, right? I mean, you don't binge on 4 pieces of salmon, because your body, your gut is releasing that CCK hormone that is triggered only by amino acids and only by omega-3 fatty acids to the brain, saying, I'm good, I'm satisfied, I'm no longer hungry. And then you start eating the Pringles and you eat the whole can, because that's wiping out that hormone and the signaling happening. And the other thing that you mentioned is leptin. This is something, whenever I talk about leptin, people are like, you mean lectins? And I'm like, no. We're talking about leptin and how you become leptin resistant as you are insulin resistant, which then also triggers thyroid resistance, because they're all connected. So I want to talk about how intermittent fasting can also help your thyroid health and make your, thyroid sensitivity and reverse that thyroid resistance, just as long as you are reversing that leptin resistance as well.
Well, I think the thyroid is oftentimes really misunderstood. I've had the fortune of being able to connect with some thyroid experts through my podcast. And one thing that I found really interesting is that when we really talk about the main benefits of fasting beyond the body composition and the weight loss that everyone likes to focus on, we're really talking about improving mitochondrial function. So the mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells. And by the age of 40, 50% of us have dysfunction in our mitochondria. And if you have chronic disease, it's even higher. And so one of the things that's very important to understand about fasting is it allows our bodies to go in, and when we're in an unfed state, it upregulates a process called autophagy. And autophagy is this waste and recycling process. It gets rid of disease disordered mitochondria, organelles, et cetera. And so for many people that have an underactive thyroid, I'll use that as the example because it's much more common to have hypothyroidism. Most common form of hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's. 80 to 85% of those diagnosed with hypothyroidism actually have that variation. I think it's probably higher than that. And so what I remind people is that when you are upregulating autophagy and you're getting rid of this diseased mitophagy, getting rid of these disease disordered mitochondria, you can actually get better, much more efficient mitochondria. And so I do find for a lot of my thyroid patients, and myself included, because for full disclosure, I have an underactive thyroid, probably Hashimoto's, which is a whole long tertiary discussion. But what I remind people is that when you're stable on medication with your thyroid and your adrenals are well supported, that I've come to find that the fasting process allows your body to upregulate not only the utilization of cofactors for thyroid hormone, but allows your thyroid to work much more efficiently. There are thyroid receptors on nearly every cell in the body. And so I would just remind people that it's this efficiency. Like, I'm all about efficiency in my personal life. And I love that fasting will help with cellular efficiency, cellular mitophagy, autophagy, all these fancy ways that really talk about your body taking out the garbage. So it's getting rid of the cells that are not working efficiently or diseased or disordered or could go on potentially to cause other health issues. And so if someone's thyroid labs are stable and they are feeling good, they have plenty of energy, they're getting proper sleep, they're eating thyroid supportive foods, I do find that in particular, it can improve, not only thyroid efficiency, but it can improve that kind of T4 to T3 conversion. So we talk about inactive to active thyroid hormone. A lot of that occurs in the gut. So it also speaks to gut health. But I do find for a lot of people, they just feel so much better. And so fasting is appropriate under those circumstances. If you're someone that just got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, you're a hot mess, you're not sleeping, you have no energy, that's not the time to add another stressor. but a lot of people with stable thyroid issues do really, really well.
Absolutely. And I've seen my own Hashimoto's get back into balance, especially with the Acceleride iodine I mentioned. But just that liver health, the cleaning up of the liver health, and just being more efficient. I liken it to a gas guzzling Suburban versus the Tesla. Your body is not producing the exhaust waste from that it was before. And so there's less cleanup and there's less need for antioxidants. And you're getting more antioxidants with your diet, right? But there's less need of it because there's less oxidative stress, which just has that domino effect. Well, we're going to take a short commercial break and we'll be right back with Cynthia Thurlow. Welcome back to Accelerated Health Radio and TV. I'm your host, Sarah Banta, and today we're talking about intermittent fasting with Cynthia Thurlow. Cynthia, two things that I wanted to make sure we talk about. The first one is salt and the importance of electrolytes when you're fasting. And what I tell people is your energy is not coming from food. Your energy, because you've got plenty of fat stores on your body. Even my 19-year-old son with 9% body fat, he's got plenty, thousands and thousands of calories. But that energy comes from hydration, and the hydration is not just water, but at the cellular level, it's the electrolytes that are needed. So can you talk about the importance of electrolytes and salt and how you utilize those during a fast?
It's a great question, a really important one. And you can imagine with 16 years of cardiology experience, I'm very, very electrolyte savvy. I always say there's a lot of benefits to having that many years working in cardiology. I think there's a lot of misnomers. So I can tell you that when I was first a nurse practitioner, we used to talk about the dangers of salt. And of course, we're talking about iodized salt, and there's a lot of iodized salt in processed foods. But when we're talking about in the context of repleting electrolytes in a fasted state, we're really talking about sodium and chloride and magnesium and potassium as, the four kind of key electrolytes that I like to focus on. And I remind people that when you are transitioning to I always refer to as a lower carbohydrate diet, because I do encourage women to eat less processed carbs, that in response to a lower salt diet and you're eating less processed foods and lower carbohydrates, you will have some renal loss. So kidney loss of salt in particular. And this is a term we use, the term diuresis. And this is completely normal, especially as you're losing glycogen stores, which is stored sugar in our muscles. And I remind people that we have to replace what we pee out or urinate out. So salt is first and foremost probably one of the most important electrolytes. Unfortunately, there's a lot of fear mongering. And I like to remind people that natural sources of salt are superior to the iodized processed forms of salt. And so I think about electrolyte repletion as an all-day process. For me, it starts when I get up in the morning. I have filtered water. I drink filtered water and green tea in a fasted state. I do have a lot of clients that don't love plain bitter coffee. And so one of the things I'll ask them to do is just add some high quality salt like Redmond's to your coffee. It'll help change the flavor profile, but we want to be adding the electrolytes in that we're losing. I also think it's important to talk about, even if you're eating an all organic diet, our soils are so depleted of natural minerals. You're not getting the amount of magnesium, which is critically important for nearly every cellular process in the body. You're not getting enough magnesium and you're not getting enough potassium in your diets unless, and there's some special caveats, unless there are specific health issues that you're struggling with. So I remind people that when people are new to fasting and perhaps they are struggling, maybe they've got a headache, they're dizzy, they've got muscle aches, more often than not, it's because as they are losing all this salt in their urine and other minerals, they're not replacing it. And those symptoms are a sign of not necessarily keto flu, but it's signs of electrolyte deficiencies. And so our bodies are exquisitely sensitive. We have intracellular and extracellular electrolytes that are really, really important for communication between cells, communication within cells. And so on a very, very basic level, it's important to understand that you want to be replacing electrolytes throughout your fast, and you want to be replacing, either if you're not drinking electrolytes during your fed state, adding salt to your foods, which, it's interesting, the salt profile, actually adding salt to foods will actually increase I think it increases the desire to eat. Like, I love salt on my vegetables, and I love salt on a cucumber, and I like salt on a steak. And so I remind people that it is designed to be a flavor enhancer, but it's also designed to have a lot of significant effects in the body. So on a very basic level, we should all be replacing electrolytes. It doesn't have to be complicated. For some people that want to start on a very basic level, they could add, Redmond's high quality salt that's actually, it's actually a US based company. And I think it's important to support US based companies as much as possible. Or you could move on to more sophisticated electrolytes. Anything that obviously has flavoring in it, you should only consume during a fed state. So I have unflavored electrolytes and salt during my fast, and then I will transition to a stevia-based option a couple times throughout the day. And that has worked really well. And that's a strategy that I do recommend for women and for men as well.
So, wow, you just hit on it. You're leading into my next question, but I want to emphasize my son, when he was 17 years old, he rose crew, very extreme athlete, working out really hard. Well, his heart was stopping. His heart was literally stopping, where he'd have to pound his chest to get it started. And we realized it was because of a lack of potassium and the proper electrolytes. And I remember talking to my natural practitioner saying, well, what's getting it to start again? He goes, the fact that he's 16 years old. He goes, if he was older, it would be detrimental. So the importance of electrolyte hits home to me so deeply. And what I do now is I do my accelerated ancient salt, which is like a Redmond salt, but with the scalar frequencies, and takes it to a whole nother level. I put it on my tongue, or I put it in my water throughout the day. I also really like the ketone product that is seawater based, and it has all of the minerals. And I'll do those packets because they're not sweetened, and it's just the seawater during my fast. But what you talked about with your electrolytes sweetened with stevia, that is what you hit me with this last week, that I thought, okay, she just rocked my world. I'm not allowed to put stevia in my tea in the morning. I'm not allowed to even have any sort of sweetener, and even chewing gum can possibly be breaking my fast. So I want you to know that I've changed my habits in the last few days because of you, and I'm trying to really regulate my sweet taste. And it's really interesting how the body changes. I can tell you just within a few days, my sweet profile has changed. My taste buds have changed. And what I didn't realize is that just by having a non-calorie sweetener, you are messing with your blood sugar and your insulin. And it's one of those things that I ignored, I denied, I did not want to hear, because I love sweet and I love stevia. And so let's talk about that a little bit, but also in a broader spectrum. We've just got a few, 10 minutes left or so, about what breaks a fast.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think for anyone that's watching or listening and they hear that and they're like, oh gosh, and I feel like there's so many restrictions, I like everyone to learn what a clean fast represents, because what we want to avoid, because we also have very sensitized palates to sweet. We consume far too much sugar or sugar-based derivatives in our diets. And so I always say, like, we really want to learn the basics of a clean fast. And a clean fast includes things like plain coffee, bitter teas. Bitter means bitter, black tea, green tea. And what is comprised in tea and coffee that are plain are bitter compounds called polyphenols. These are plant-based compounds, and they help boost fat oxidation. So let me say that again. They help boost the release and the burning of fat, stored fat in the body. And so we want to make sure that we are not adulterating that. We can consume electrolytes that are unsweetened with water. And it's a great way. It's a really great break. Like I was actually telling one of my youngest son before I jumped on with you that I was actually ending my feeding window early today because I'm going to do a 24-hour fast starting, like 3:00 today until tomorrow. And I find that for myself, doing a longer fast can help me like reset my taste buds. So I'm not at all surprised that over the last couple of days, you have seen the same by removing sugars. And it's important to understand that when we put something sweet on our tongue, we trigger something called the cephalic phase insulin response, which is telling our body something sweet is coming. Now, you can, bring up research. I have people who like to argue about this all the time on social media. They're like in a lab rat, they show they didn't get an insulin response. And I just say, I don't know about you, but if I even smell something delicious that my mom is making that's sweet or something my grandmother would have made, or if I put something sweet on my tongue, I know my body anticipates getting food. So learn how to do a clean fast. I think that's an important distinction. When we're talking about sweeteners, obviously save the sugar save the stevia or monk fruit or whatever, cleaner sugar you use for your feeding window. Enjoy that, stevia sweetened electrolyte that you've been looking at, or the stevia sweetened chocolate that you enjoy. Enjoy it at that point, but give your body a time to recalibrate and to allow it to actually tap into the intrinsic nature of a clean fast. Now, we can talk about dirty fast. We can talk about what I refer to as training wheels. There are people that are coming from a standard American diet that are not very physically active that may need training wheels for a period of time, but recognizing it as such, whether that's adding copious amounts of MCT oil or adding, if you have to put cream in your coffee for a period of time because you just really are struggling to get, to 12 hours in a fasted state, that is okay. You recognize it as such, you give yourself grace, and then you kind of move on. Because one thing I don't like is how divisive, the health and wellness space can be about this is good or this is bad. This is right or this is wrong. I remind people we're all on our own journey and it's important to give ourselves grace. And so in those distinctions, I like to say, okay, that's kind of a gray area. That's kind of bordering on dirty fasting with the understanding that you're going to get to a point where you won't need to add those fats to your coffee or to your tea to be able to get to longer periods in a fasted state. So hopefully I answered your question. I do think in terms of sweeteners, I'm not a fan of aspartame. There's a lot of research to provide that demonstrates it's really non-beneficial, actually destructive to the gut microbiome. Actually, there's a lot of research on these non-nutrient sweeteners. And so really deciding what works best for you. That's why I think, a clean variation of stevia or monk fruit, if you like that, or thyrotol is another one that a lot of people are using. I do find that some of these derivatives, sugar alcohols, in some instances can be a little bit disruptive to the gut. Sometimes people feel like they get gas and bloating. So I always say, always proceed with caution and just be open-minded that there might be something that you find as an alternative that you actually enjoy.
I love what you're saying. And it goes along with, when keto became popular, everyone was throwing in all of these processed keto foods and with these bad vegetable oils in them and the wrong kind of proteins and the wrong kind of fats. And you thought, oh, well, it's keto, right? But then people would say, well, keto didn't work for me. Well, it wasn't that keto didn't work for you. It was that you were eating the processed foods and it was dirty keto. Mm-hmm. And I am going to McDonald's and having it animal style. That doesn't work. And it goes along with the same philosophy with the fasting. And it's just, I like what you're saying, that people need to not be just so black and white about it, that you can do it in steps. And my goodness, I'm humbly sitting here going, I've been doing it the wrong way, in a dirty way for years, but it got me some benefit. And now I'm just excited to see what the next step is and what I'm going to notice. Mental clarity, detoxification pathways opening up in a way. Our friend Terry Cochran was like, Sarah, stevia can actually back up your liver. And here I am promoting liver flushes 4 times a year to my clients, not knowing that I'm actually backing up my own liver. So anyways, Cynthia, I have so much more to talk to you about, and I wish we had more time. But before we get going, is there any last little tip you want to give my listeners that we did not cover today?
Well, I think, first and foremost, irrespective of where you are in your fasting journey, just understand that it's like peeling an onion. We will learn new ways to do things on this fasting journey. And so as an example, Sarah, you mentioned that, you were using some stevia during your fasting window. And as we learn more, we do better. And so even for myself, like I'm knee deep in learning more, a deeper level about autophagy. And so I'm sharing this information with my clients and my coaches. And so I just think we are on a journey. So give yourself grace, enjoy the process. Obviously, if you want to learn more, you definitely want to check out my book, Intermittent Fasting Transformation. But it's really an exciting time because this is really the first book that has been written from a woman's perspective as a clinician, but also designed for women. And we're not many men. So we do have to fast a little differently.
Absolutely. Studies are all on RAS in men and not us women. And it can only go so far. Well, Cynthia, thank you so much for today. And of course, we'd love to have you back, but your book is amazing. And like I said, it is in layman's terms, but gets you a little bit nerdy so that you can understand why. And when you understand the why, things stick. It's if you just tell someone to do something, they're not going to, it's just like your kids, right? If you tell them something to do without a reason for it, they're not going to listen to you. But when you give them reason, they do. So thank you, Cynthia. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us today. If I can help you with your health issues, you can contact me directly through the website, acceleratedhealthproducts.com. You can also join my free group coaching that's on Telegram. We do weekly Zooms that are all free and available to anybody on Mondays. And it's all posted on my YouTube channel as well, Accelerated Health Radio and TV. You can find this episode and all my episodes on over 100 podcast platforms, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, Stitcher, Pandora, or whatever podcast platform you subscribe to. So if you liked what you heard today, please hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, share this with a few friends. It helps me help you and help me share my message and my guests. Join us every week, Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time live. And you can also use coupon W4HC20 for 20% off site-wide. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.